Barakim Habarim. I'm Stephen Bruck. This is Messianic Moment Ministries, and I want to welcome you. Today is the 7th day of March 2023, and it is the day of Purim, the holiday that Jews love to celebrate throughout the world. So this is going to be a little on the long side, and I hope very entertaining for you, because the traditional thing to do on this day is to read the Megillah of Hadassah, in other words, the book of Esther. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this in a way that does it just like we do in the synagogues, where we have so much fun, because every time we hear Esther's name, we all go, because she's so beautiful, and Mordecai, we go, yay, because he's the hero, and Haman, we go, boo, and we ring these groggers, noisemakers, because, well, he's the bad guy. So, we're going to do this. Like I said, it's going to be a little on the long side, but I hope it's enjoyable for you, and it's all meant to be in good fun. So, here we go. This story begins way back when, in the days of King Ahasuerus, during the time of the Babylonian exile, somewhere between 460 and 350 BC. Now, the king's main squeeze was a beautiful queen called Vashti, and at the time this story begins, for 6 months in a row, the king had been entertaining nobles and provincial officials from all of the 127 provinces he controlled. At this time, he was showing off all that he had. At the same time, Queen Vashti was entertaining the women. Now, after a week of solid drinking, the king decided to show off his queen and had his officers tell her to come wearing her crown. Well, Vashti refused to come, and probably because she was thinking, when the king said to wear my crown, he wants to show off my beauty. He means to wear only my crown. In front of all those men who are drunk and disorderly, he wants me to do a gypsy rose leaf for them? I don't think so. Well, this really pissed off the king, and he asked his legal team what to do about it, and they said in order that the entire kingdom doesn't have women refusing to do as their husbands say, remove her from her position and send Vashti away. Well, the king thought that was a good idea. So he fired the queen and gave her a one-way ticket out of Persia. Later, well, the king was feeling, a little tense, if you get my drift, and he thought maybe he shouldn't have gotten rid of a hottie like Vashti so quickly. See, you need to understand that in those days, when the king gave an order, it was impossible for the order to be reversed, even by the king. So, the legal team suggested finding a virgin for the king, and a kingdom-wide beauty pageant was held. Now, there was a man called Mordecai, a Jew, who had raised his niece as his own daughter, and her name was Hadassah, better known to us as Esther. Well, this girl was H-O-T, and was ordered immediately into the beauty pageant. But Mordecai told Esther not to reveal her heritage, and when she appeared before the man in charge, he liked her and took her under his wing, so to speak, to help her prepare for the judging by the king. Well, this hot little number spent her time with the king and pleased him so much that he gave her the numero uno position, making her his new main squeeze. And Mordecai would then spend his days at the king's gate in order to hear about how Esther was doing. Well, one time when he was there, he heard two officials plotting against the king. He told Esther, and she relayed the message, which prevented the assassination, and Esther gave the credit to Mordecai. Okay, let's go down the road a ways. The king begins to single out a man named Haman as his XO, and Haman enjoyed everyone bowing down to him. Everyone, that is, except Mordecai, who said he won't bow down to any man because he is a Jew. Well, eventually, Haman decided that killing Mordecai wasn't enough. He was going to kill all the Jews throughout all the 127 provinces. Haman had some serious anger management issues. So they began to throw lots called Pur, hence the name of this holiday, Purim, which is the plural form of that word. And they threw these lots to see when this genocide would take place, and the lot fell to the 13th day of the month of Adar. Well, Haman went to the king and told him there was certain people within the king's realm, and they refused to obey the king, and they have their own laws. He never mentioned it was the Jews. And he asked the king to allow him to totally destroy these rebels. Well, the king gave Haman the okie dokie, gave him a signet ring to use, and he sealed the order with his ring, and that sealed the fate of all the Jews in all 127 provinces. In the meantime, for Mordecai, Haman built a gallows 75 feet high, which he's going to use to hang Mordecai. Oh, now, of course, when Mordecai heard about the genocide, he tore his clothes and he sat in ashes. Yeah, that's what they did back then when they got really bad news. He got word to Esther she had better do something, but she said the law said that anyone who goes before the king without being called will be killed, unless the king points his scepter at them to show they can approach. She said the king hasn't called her, so if she goes to him, she might be killed. Mordecai told her that she isn't going to survive this Tsuris just because she's the king's #1 nightcap. Someone, sooner or later, will spill the beans that she is a Jew, and she will be killed, just like all the rest of her people. Okay, time out. Look, here's the big message in this book. Mordecai says that if she fails to help, salvation will come from the Jews from somewhere else. Here's why that statement is so important. This is the only reference to God in the entire book. In fact, this is the only book in the Bible where God is not mentioned at all. And the most important line in this book is when Mordecai says that maybe she came into her royal position for just such a time as this. Well, getting back to the story, Esther pulls up her little girl panties and says she will fast for 3 days and asks that all the women do the same, and then she will go before the king. And, well, if she dies, then she dies. On the 3rd day of her fast, she went to the king, and he held out the scepter to her, asking what she wanted. Well, she asked that the king and Haman come to a dinner she would prepare for them. Haman told his wife about this, bragging that only he and the king were invited, and she said that was a really good sign. Well, that night, the king had trouble sleeping and asked to have the royal records read to him. Well, they read about how Mordecai saved the king's life, and he asked what was done for the man as a reward. They said nothing was ever done. Now, Haman was out in the court, and the king saw him and called for him. He asked Haman, what should the king do for a man he wishes to honor? Haman, of course, being the egocentric nutcase he was, thought this had to be for him. So he said to dress the man in the king's robes, put a crown on his head, place him on the king's horse, and have an important official lead the horse throughout the whole city of Shushan, proclaiming, this is what is done for a man the king wants to honor. The king says, hey, I love this, and orders Haman to do everything he said for the Jew called Mordecai, and that Haman himself must lead the horse throughout the city and make the proclamation. Well, that was a surprise. Later, when Haman told his wife what happened, she said that was the beginning of the end for him, as from now on, Mordecai would become more and Haman would become less. By the way, she was spot on with that prophecy. Excuse me. Well, now it's time for the dinner party, and Haman and the king go to Esther's place. After dinner, the king asks Esther what she would like, and she says, come to dinner again tomorrow night with Haman, and then she will make a request. Well, next night they're at dinner. Finally, the king says, all right already, what do you want? Esther says that she would like to have her life spared, as well as the lives of her people who have been sold to be destroyed. The king asks, who did this thing? And she says, it's that wicked enemy, Haman. Well, the king must have realized how Haman took him for a fool, and he was so enraged, he walked out onto the patio to cool off a bit. Haman, knowing that he's in hot water now, throws himself on the couch Esther was sitting on to beg for his life. Well, just then, the king comes in, and seeing Haman on the couch with the queen, he declares, is this man going to rape the queen right here in front of me? Oy Gewalt. That was all it took. The attendants covered Haman's face, and the king ordered him to be hung on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. Then the king gave the house of Haman and all his possessions to Mordecai, as well as the king's signet ring Haman had worn, and told Mordecai that the original order can't be reversed, so he should issue an order allowing the Jews everywhere to defend themselves. When the big day came, many of the people added their support to the Jews because, well, Mordecai had risen to a position of power and importance in the kingdom, and they wanted to be on the winning side. Needless to say, the Jews kicked Tuchus, and all the enemies of the Jews, the supporters of Haman, were destroyed. Esther and Mordecai then sent out a letter to all the people in all 127 provinces proclaiming this date to be celebrated as a joyous holiday from now on. And that is why we celebrate Purim today with a fun-filled reading of the Megillah of Hadassah, with plenty of good food and drink. My favorite food being the traditional three-cornered cookie called hamantashen, named after Haman, where the three corners are supposedly to represent the three-cornered hat Haman wore. Many synagogues will also have parties where we dress up as the characters from that time. Well, I hope you enjoyed this reading, and may I wish you Chag Purim Sameach, which is Happy Purim.